I have with us Jeff Carpenter, the Senior Director, Contract Sourcing and Category Management from Boeing Commercial Airplanes. First time in Europe presenting personally about the Boeing outlook. And I can announce as well that he is also open for a Q&A session after his presentation. So be prepared if you have any questions. We will have our team running around with a micro and getting your questions for Jeff Carpenter. So very warm welcome here in our ITA European Conference.
All right. Hey, good morning. Thanks for all the time. Been a fun couple of days here. Sorry I haven't seen everybody. I like to try and see as many people as I can, and I haven't. Been at Boeing for a long time, 27 years. This is probably, I don't even know, my 11th or 12th ITA, but the first one, I've lost track, Sam. So the first one in Europe. One of the elephants in the room, there's a couple of elephants in the room I want to talk about. Some are just me being funny and some are serious. The first one, though, I came all the way to Europe to see the titanium industry, and Airbus isn't here. Isn't that weird? But there's other French people here. So just write this down. Who loves the titanium industry more? No one does. Yeah. But then for the rest of you, taking notes to pass on to my Airbus friends. On a serious note, I am glad for all of you that they are doing well on rates, because that's helping us and helping all of you guys keep production going. So super appreciative of the work Airbus is doing to help out as well. And I should also say thank you. So I always like to start there. Thank you all for being part of the supply chain, being part of our supply chain. Many of you are in our supply chain now. Some of you are potentials in the future, so look forward to hopefully some of that. But thanks for hanging with us. I feel like I say this, I'm getting tired of saying this. It's been a tough couple of years. It's been a tough 4 years. And I have a feeling 24 is going to be another tough year for us. So on a more serious note, the real elephant in the room is a few things. We are for sure focusing on taking comprehensive actions to strengthen our quality at Boeing. There's no question there. I saw a review, some of our suppliers got a preview of it, of our 90-day plan a couple weeks ago. So that's not out yet, but we'll look forward to hopefully presenting it to the FAA soon. We have been very transparent with the FAA. They're in our factories. Our airline customers are in our factories. We're in our suppliers' factories. We've increased our quality staffing more than 20%. Inspecting airplanes, we've got a full team on board at Spirit. We have conducted safety and quality stand downs with so far 70,000 of our employees. That's where you take a whole day and you don't do other work. You cancel all meetings and you listen to your employees and you talk about safety. Not just, and many people get this misunderstand. We spend a lot of time talking about workplace safety and worker safety and lost workday cases and that sort of stuff. We're still talking about that. That's all important, but we're also adding in a better focus on a safety management system and product safety. And so that's the thing that I think for the supply chain to think about. If you go to the FAA website, they've got a whole section on what a safety management system is. You should go take a look at it. It's insightful. And it's talking about how do you, in your day, in your manufacturing process, what are you doing to ensure the product safety for the folks that use your products and how those things move through your factory? And how do you think about those things and get your people thinking about those things? A lot of it is listening to your people. And so we've had, like I said, 70,000 folks in safety stand downs. We've had almost 30,000 ideas come from our team. 500% increase in feedback from our employees about things that they think we should be doing better. and the management team is listening and taking action. I know many suppliers are probably better at this. For us, we're trying to get better at it, and that's what we're committed to. Airplane rates, I don't have a chart on airplane rates, but I'm going to talk mostly current market outlook, just fair warning. Those of you that have seen me talk before, that'll be the boring part. For those of you that are new to this, it'll be maybe somewhat interesting. But no secret, we've said it in our earnings announcements. We are operating at less than 38 on a 737 right now. And we will get there by the end of the year. That's as much guidance as we're putting out. 5 a month on the 787, 4 a month on 777, 777X, and 3 on a 767. That's where we're running. So to the extent you guys had a question on rates, I preempted them. The thing I normally do at an ITA that I didn't do yet, this one, I normally have it's a spoiler alert. I normally have sort of our, inventory burn and that sort of stuff. I don't have that this time. We're trying to get our production system stabilized. And the truth is, I can't tell you what our inventory burn is going to look like. So probably by the end of the year, for the next ITA in Austin, thank you, I'll have it done. So for those of you that are in Austin, look forward to that little piece of insight. Fun facts on the 737, just because I think fun facts are interesting. With backlog of 6,200 airplanes sold. In the time between the time I've started this discussion and the time I've ended, 90 Maxes will have taken off, and 1,350 737s will have taken off. Pretty cool. And you guys all did that, like we all did that. So interesting. Okay, let's get into the current market outlook. And so this is something we have published for something like 60 years. It's for the supply chain. For those of you that haven't seen it, we do a comprehensive look at a 20-year forecast for all aircraft types from regional on up, all manufacturers. So that's what you're going to see. We'll talk about what's in our forecast, why we believe in the numbers, and I'll give you another spoiler. We're something like 45,000 airplanes or something like that, or 43,000 airplanes in the next 20 years that they need to get built. And so we'll go through the why. We're going to spend a lot of time reflecting on 2019, and then I hope this is the last time we do that, because we've actually stopped when we get to our forecasting period. We've gotten tired of talking about 2019, and we've baselined 2022 as sort of our going forward forecasting period. So you'll see that as well. And so at the next ITA, we'll have a refreshed version of this as well. But if you look back, so for a little while, we're all going to talk about pre-COVID, and I know people are tired of talking about it, but there's some interesting insights there. 2020 to now, it's amazing, the recovery. Those of you that fly, everything's back. Like that's sort of the punchline, and you're going to see in a bunch of charts. Everything is back. The only thing that lagged is twin aisles. It's lagging still a little bit, is twin aisles out of Asia, but generally everything is back and single aisles are exceeding. We thought the fundamentals will let us snap back hard. They have snapped back hard, and so that's giving us even more confidence in our forecast. Okay. Flipping because I got some little fun facts in here. On this one, this is the big chart to say, yes, everything's back. It shows 92% passenger capacity. That's a little bit of a math problem because it has to do with average flight length and people on it. And because the twin aisles aren't flying as much in terms of Asia, it's sort of messed with the math. The single aisles are actually exceeding. Twin aisles are coming down, but this should correct by the end of the year. Speaking of single aisles, you can see the dark bars on the right, on the left-hand chart, are the single aisles exceeding in all regions. So no surprise there. And the twin aisles lagging a little bit in all regions. Again, if you've been watching this for a while, not new news, but it's where we're at. Economic fundamental. We spent a lot of time talking about the economy. Interest rates have been going up. Inflation went up. And the thing that gives us a lot of continued confidence is on the left-hand side. Consumption is still really strong. The excess savings, just in the US, we peaked out at $2.3 trillion of excess savings in people's savings accounts. That's not all gone. there's still 1.4 trillion left of excess savings. So that's driving incredible consumption. It's probably helping keep in the center inflation hotter than we all wanted, right? All the governments, not all the, many of the governments cranked up interest rates to fight inflation. Inflation has come down, but it's sort of petered out, right? In the last several months and quarters, it's sort of petered out. That's because the consumption is still so hot. So keep that in mind. But if you're in the airplane making business, people got extra money, they want to go fly. That's good news. That tells us the fundamentals are good, even in sort of a facing into a weakening economy. And once that center chart, once the CPI, the inflation comes back down to normal, guess what? Wage growth is still intact. So as people's cost of living comes down, buying food at the grocery store and whatever else, they're still going to fly, and they're going to fly even more. So from a fundamental standpoint, you're going to see over and over again, there's not a demand problem here for people wanting to fly. There's not a demand problem for airlines wanting to buy airplanes. There's a supply problem, and it's us, and it's our supply chain, and it's getting, how much output can we get out the door to serve the need? That's the problem. And we think the interest rates, I think, those little dots are anybody's best guess of when rates are going to start to pop back down. Not there yet. Again, like I said, demand is not a constraint. I think the two items on the left are basically solved. It's the item on the right, supply chain stability, and we're part of the supply chain. So if you, in this context, this is supplying the airlines. So we're one of the big suppliers. We could be doing better. And a lot of reasons we can be doing better. Many are self-inflicted, some are inflicted, many are inflicted by our supply chain. Quality problems, delivery problems, inbound to us, causing challenges in our factories. Speaking of growth, this is my favorite fun fact. Those of you that have been on this journey with me for the last 10 years know this, and the number hasn't changed. 80% of the world's population has never been on an airplane. Like, for those of you in the room, that just sounds crazy. But for people in, developing economies that want to go to Disneyland or Ireland or anywhere in Europe, like, that's a dream. And one day they'll get there. Well, this says we're going to create 500 million new middle-class households. That's not people, that's households in the next 20 years, and they're all going to want to travel. So from an underpinning demand standpoint, that's underpinning demand. Speaking of cost, airline travel's pretty efficient, pretty cheap. If you look at your total trip cost, it's only up 18% since year 2000. Food's doubled, everything else has gone way up in that time. So if you're talking about going on a trip, yeah, it seems like airline tickets are expensive relative to the price of everything else. It's still a darn good value. No surprise that air travel adds value on longer trips. This is a sort of simple graphic to say, yeah, anything longer than 500 miles, people are going to fly. Generally true. So what's going on the airline side? Low-cost carrier growth. And I've got some graphics on all of these things. Network flexibility. This is models and minor models that an airline carries. Cabin optimization. This is what's, maybe 5 or 6, 7 years ago seemed weird. Premium economy and economy plus, and I got to buy my lunch on an airplane. Like, all those things were weird, 5 years ago. Now you can't wait to get on and look at the little menu of your box lunch, and you're happy to shell out 10 or 12 bucks for the, the cool little box lunch on the airlines. That's now the new norm, but it's a really good, interesting way for them to create more revenue. And then sustainability. We'll talk about that as well. By the way, building new airplanes is highly sustainable, so we'll have some numbers on that. Low-cost carriers up 6x in 20 years, and it'll be 41% of the market in 20 years in the next 20 years. And so low-cost carriers, no surprise. In fact, we're in the home of one of the best low-cost carriers on the planet. I flew Ryanair last summer with my family. It was amazing. The turn time, I think, is still the best I've ever experienced on a Ryanair flight. Very cool. How are the airlines adapting? So this is an interesting chart that says, all right, if you look at the little dash lines, 2019, little balls, 2023, and the daily frequencies by day of the week. So for business travelers, no shocker, most of your frequencies are Monday, Thursday, and Friday, right? Leaving the office to go on a trip, coming back home. I mean, it's Thursday. How many of you are flying today or tomorrow? Like all of us, right? What the airlines have done because of revenge travel and the pent-up demand for leisure travel, they've added a ton of frequencies in the last year on weekends. Guess what? Business travelers are using weekend travel as well. Most of my team traveled on Sunday to get here. From a versatility standpoint, this is the data that shows, when we launched the 787, we scrapped the 747-910K, if anybody knew what that program was, and launched the Sonic Cruiser, which turned into the 787. By the way, same day that Airbus launched the A380. That was the divergence in the calendar, or in the point in time when Boeing said point to point for small twin aisles, wide bodies, and Airbus attempted to increase the hub and spoke thing with the big airplane. And you look back and see what happened now. Look at the city pairs. It's a 15% increase in city pairs for wide bodies just in the last few years. So it's a further evidence, of course, four-engine airplanes are now dead, and we're all flying smaller, efficient twins. It was a very strange thing on my way over here. I got on a BA flight from Seattle I had two choices. I could have taken BA from Seattle to Heathrow, then the little hop over here, which I did, or Aer Lingus. And I looked at the airplane model. I was like, oh, I got to go fly on a 787. That was my choice, right? But when I got on the flight, it was like, wow, it's actually kind of a tired cabin. It was the -9. It has sort of the old configuration. And it's weird, as one who worked on the program starting in the year 2000 and saw it through flight test and delivery, just think that airplane I spent so much of my life on building now has an old cabin. Anyway, strange little wake up for some of us that have been doing this for a while. And then you look at the missions. No surprise, the big airplanes go a long ways. Just a little graphic on the increase in premium economy and premium services. Again, just in the US, I don't know what I wish I knew the numbers for Europe. Something I gotta study up for next time. 1.4 trillion in leftover savings translates into, yeah, I'll pay more for an extra 6 inches of room or a lie flat seat or a better lunch. Airlines are capitalizing on that. Sustainability, 40% of the MD 717 size airplanes have been retired just in the last few years. 70% of the four-engine aircraft retired. From a sustainability standpoint, that's actually the number one thing that we contribute to the industry is new airplanes that are lighter because of the things you guys do in the room with your wonderful metal, and the things that us and Airbus do making new airplanes. They're 20 to 40% more efficient. 20 to 40% more efficient. Imagine if your cars got electric cars now get there, but before the EVs, you didn't see those kind of gains every year on cars. It's pretty amazing. Staff, we're spending a lot of time working on sustainable aviation fuel, and that'll be, we think, our largest opportunity to get to net zero by 2050. And then, of course, the industry is doing a bunch of investment, as are we, in all the various VTOLs. I've got a chart on this later. We don't see this as it's not necessarily a competitor to the airplanes we do or many of the airplanes we forecast. It's a complementary technology of moving people from where they live or near where they live to the airport in a more efficient manner. So we think that'll be a nice contributor as well. And I've got some numbers on that later. A little bit on fleet trends. Airlines, this was data from 193 airlines with more than 30 aircraft in their fleet. 75 of them have phased out families to simplify their fleets. So they're trying to get more efficient. That's pilot training. This is ground crew training, other ways of getting efficiency for the airlines. Fleet renewal. It's underway, but it's delayed. In a normal year, it's a 2 to 3% every year. We retire an aircraft. You know, the fleet retires the aircraft about 2-3% per year. Since 2015, that average has been degraded by a full percentage point. Okay, full percentage point. That doesn't sound like much. That's 1,500 airplanes that should have been retired that aren't. That's us unable to serve the market. Okay. We're getting there. So we're getting there. So this is the pink is the new generation of aircraft. So just a sliver so far in the global fleet. It's definitely renewing, but we've got a long ways to go. And good news is we've got a lot of airplanes to make in front of us for a lot of years. Regionals, this is not such as much of a good story on the regional size. Pilot shortage post-pandemic has contributed to this. And if you've got a pilot shortage and you want to fly an airplane, you're going to put the most people in the airplane you can. The larger single aisles are eating the market here. And so the regionals are really going to continue to struggle for a while because of the value proposition that a 737, A320 size airplane brings, and then the sheer need for pilots. This is not in our forecast, so we don't forecast for the sort of VTOL space, but it's certainly interesting to watch, given that there's 16 billion so far invested in the market, and including ours, the little yellow one on the left there. Of the 15,000 units that we think will be produced potentially by 2035, about 10% are capable of operating at greater than 200 miles. So that hits about a 2% impact in terms of global fleets. It's not a mover for us making big airplanes. It's certainly interesting. It's certainly something everyone's investing in, including us. And it's going to be very cool. How many went to Paris Air Show last year? How many went to our little we didn't have a booth. We had a static display of the Whisk aircraft. Pretty cool. If you went in there, you would have seen a little sign that said something like, I think it was Charles de Gaulle to Paris in 7 minutes for 50 euros. That took me an hour and a half, and I paid 60 on a cab. So that's the value proposition of these things. You get off the airplane, you open up your app, it says go to terminal, whatever. You hop on your autonomous, EV, and you take a 7-minute ride to wherever you got to be. You get one step closer. You take all the traffic off the road, and so that's the value proposition for these things. We think they'll be very complementary of the travel system, but working on it and super interesting. Okay, air cargo. Cargo is important to us, and I think important to all of us, and we are really enjoy this market. It is quite a bit more erratic than the passenger market. It's a little choppier, higher volatility. It continues to outpace GDP, driven by e-commerce, package freight, and supply chain stability. Supply chain stability sounds weird. I'll talk about that in a minute. Global trade drives package freight, especially on the twin aisle 6-7 size freighter aircraft. But you see the long-term trends are outpacing GDP again. Growth in e-commerce, significant growth in e-commerce, and supply chain diversity. And so, if you think about, how many dealt with a port problem and port delays a few years ago, and some areas we're still dealing with them. In some countries, we ship a lot of metal outbound. It's gotten a lot better, but we'll fly metal on airplanes. We'll fly forgings on airplanes. There's a bunch of stuff. In terms of stuff that gets moved, it's a single-digit percentage of product that gets moved on airplanes versus ocean freight or rail. But many parts of the supply chain have permanently switched to air cargo transport because it's more reliable. You know, you're not waiting to go through a port. You're not stuck in a bay at anchor for however long. You're not dealing with a Red Sea, you know, boat that went sideways, or some other, you know, people lobbing bombs at and missiles at ships in the Gulf. You know, they're shifting to this because it's more reliable. They're not going to shift, you know, for everything because it's still terribly expensive. Though for a while there was almost parity between ocean freight, container cost, and air freight. It was a value prop. It got a lot better for a while. It's moderated now, and people are moving from a global diversification standpoint. Companies, manufacturers, e-commerce providers, us that are buying clothes and stuff. Your stuff is coming from a more diverse set of countries. And look at just these three, the increase in air cargo traffic. And this is other parts, not us, like, you know, metal people, right? But this is other parts of the world diversifying their supply chain, driving air cargo growth, driving demand for freighter airplanes, which we love. And this is another little bit of data on how e-commerce is significantly boosting the traffic routes. It's something like 80% of the express cargo flies on a dedicated twin aisle freighter. And the numbers are staggering. This thing is up 60%. We predict up 60% in GDP, and that's going to drive it. Tripling of the passenger traffic, cargo, back to cargo for a minute. As I think I missed with my cargo chart. Let me just come it up. I have a better cargo chart on the numbers. Oh, please. Okay, I got a few more on that. I'll wait on that. Long-term fundamentals. Back to that. We talked about the long-term fundamentals already. You see all the numbers on the screen. This is where we're shifting from dropping 2019. So going forward, we're not going to talk about 2019 anymore. The base year is now 2022. These are the numbers that are in our 20-year prediction based on 2022. GDP, passenger growth, cargo traffic I was just talking about. I'll have another slide on that in a minute. And then the fleet size. The fleet size is interesting. Half of it's going to be replacement, half of it's going to be growth. Speaking of replacement and growth and traffic growth, in more mature markets, left side, US, Americas, Europe, it's sort of like steady growth in the next 20 years. Pretty even split between now and the future. That turns into a fleet that's about 2/3 of the fleet is servicing replacement of aging aircraft on the right. Same regions. Back on the left, rapid growth, the orange bars, significant growth in all those markets. Over on the right, 60% of the aircraft feeding those markets will be for growth. So 2/3 replacement, Americas and Europe, 60% new aircraft growth, fleet growth, rest of the world. So there you are, 42,500 and some odd airplanes over 20 years, a staggering number. You see how it breaks out between twin aisles, single aisles, freighters and regionals. By the way, the large, so traditional regional players like Embraer, they show up in the single aisle number, as does Comac, for reference there. On the right-hand side, this has been great for years. You know, I've said this before when I first started talking about this, you know, early 2000s, it was 2/3, you know, the 20-year forecast was 2/3 North America and Europe in terms of growth. And now it's very balanced. This is why those sort of wild economic swings in the US no longer really affect airplane rates because we have such a global customer base. So good for us, good for all of you. From an efficiency standpoint, the future fleet would have been about 8,000 airplanes bigger. If it's not, which is a staggering number to get your head around. So we're predicting 42,000 airplanes, would have been closer to 50,000 airplanes needed over the next 20 years. Had it not been for bigger airplanes, increased turn times, you know, back to Ryanair, things like using more flight hours per day and turn times, that's keeping the rates in a place where it might be sustainable. I don't have a chart on this, but this turns into, we got to build, if you look at this number, we got to build 2,000 airplanes a year. It's a lot, 2,000 airplanes a year. Okay. Where's it going? Half replacement, half growth. We're going to retain a handful of the airplanes we have now over the next 20 years. Pretty staggering. So we always show this chart because a lot of people say, oh, Boeing and Airbus are overbuilding, they're overserving the market. No. Half of what we're doing is just replacing old airplanes. Because back to the sustainability chart, 20 to 40% more efficiency. Back to freighters. This is again, I don't know why I think the freighter market is so fascinating. It's pretty small, but it's fun. 2/3 of the overall freighter markets, freighter aircraft are conversions, 70% are single aisle. But on the left-hand side, those two sort of the pink and the greenish bar, that's the wide bodies. Half of those are new builds. It's a pretty important market for us. 767 today is only a tanker and only a freighter. 777 today is only a freighter. We haven't built a passenger 777. I don't remember the last one we built. It's been a long time. 777X, some point, look at that one into service. That'll be the passenger airplane of the future. But the freighter market is really important to us. And if you think about the supply chain feeding us, can you imagine if we didn't have such a strong cargo fleet? For those of you that make titanium that goes into landing gear, or interesting parts that go into a 777 or a 767. I mean, that freighter market is super important to us and you all. So keep buying on Amazon, keep clicking next day, Prime. Interesting data here. Why talk about a services thing in a titanium conference? More than half of the $3.8 trillion in services is parts. We all make stuff that goes into parts. So this is the aftermarket. This is pretty interesting. And it's probably hard for you guys to see when you're making titanium. You look at build rates and all this. The aftermarket is a huge component. I suspect you guys have a hard time. I know we have a hard time forecasting it, and I suspect it's not easy for everybody else. And the right side is just sort of fun facts. 2.2 million people need to be hired to service the aircraft industry, the aftermarket industry in the next 20 years. The airlines are going to spend $200 billion on training people. Interesting data. Okay. From flipping now out of the current market outlook into the sort of the only custom stuff. I did this. I forget I did this. Maybe who went to the Speed News thing? I think I used this in the Speed News thing. Yeah, sorry for the repeat. Yeah, the same stuff. But looking back at what we did is sort of, looking back at sort of our world and the supply chain inside Boeing in the last year or so, what did we mess with? Well, and from an architecture standpoint, we did a lot more dual sourcing. Those of you in the supply chain, we talk about this all the time. No surprise, I saw it in the opening comments. I forget if it was Sam or Bob mentioned supply chain diversity is a big key. Like we didn't make it up. Everyone's doing it, but it's important for us, and it's what saved our bacon and things like getting out of Russia. We had already a lot of diversity plans in place that we could turn on. So we've got spending a lot of time dual sourcing sort of all of our content, at least in my space. Dual sourcing spirit is probably not the thing I'm going to work on, but all the stuff that feeds them, you bet. Forgings, castings, and fasteners, and fittings, and electrical standards, sort of all the stuff that you need to make airplanes. We're spending a lot of time on that. Increased qualifications. Well, you can't dual source without doing more quals, and so we're doing quals not only on the new sources for sort of things and things we buy directly, but also looking at materials. So as our materials we should expand our quals on, we're actively expanding qualifications on across all materials. We are actively expanding our aggregation programs. So what are aggregation programs? For those of you that don't know, Boeing buys and sells titanium, aluminum, fasteners, bearings, electrical standards. We have programs where we buy those things for all of our supply chain and sell them back to them. And we buy from the manufacturers, we sell to our largely part fabricators and assemblers. And those are aggregation programs. Many companies don't do it the same way. They don't like to put their balance sheet out there and buy and sell. We do. We help the part makers out with price stability, and we handle the price instability with the manufacturers direct. That's maybe one of the probably the key features. And we hold safety stock, and we hold buffer inventory, and we think about things like geopolitical emergencies and should we prevent some disaster in the future and have little inventory over here squirreled away? Yes. We don't rely on a sort of a enabled hub and spoke system. You buy some from you off my contract, and you buy some from you off my contract. We like to see the demand and be able to know when the signals are and aren't happening. And speaking of instability, who's not paying their bills? So this is one of the sort of least fun features of 2023 is the phone calls of somebody not getting something for want of paying a bill because they didn't have cash or working capital or were financially distressed. And in our aggregation programs, we see all that because they buy the metal, the fasteners, the electrical standards from us. So if they're not paying us, well, I can see that and I can manage it and I can work on it, right? We can help somebody out. We can see it ahead of time. But if there's payment issues going on in the sub-tier base, oftentimes we won't see it until it's way too late. And that was one feature of 2023 that was unpleasant. But when we talk about expanding aggregation, as I mentioned, tie, aluminum, fasteners, bearings, electrical standards, that's what we do now. What are we going to expand into? Some sort of things we missed. Forgings. So we're going to run forgings through our aggregation program. Aluminum bar. We do aluminum, but we didn't do aluminum bar. We're going to do aluminum bar now. And we're looking at a handful of other things. Let's leave it at that. Including, we'll leave it at that. We're looking at other things and more to come as we roll out more aggregation programs. Instability was a key feature of last year. No surprise. We had a lot of work transfers in our supply chain. Some initiated by us, many or most initiated by our suppliers, moving work amongst each other into other sub-tiers. Work transfer caused a lot of instability if you mismanage it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. So as long as you manage it, it can be helpful. A lot of people didn't manage it, and it was a problem. Financial distress, talked about that. People not paying their bills. There's other forms of financial distress. People can't pay their employees. That's bad, right? People are closing their business. That's bad. And so as an OEM, we get the fun of dealing with all these sort of things. And so actually, this is a good point to ask for help from you all. If you're selling something in a part of our supply chain and they serve us and you see financial weakness, please tell us. Hard to solve a problem we don't know about. Can't manage a secret, right? We've got some outside process houses that do a really good job. There's sort of the end of the line for a machine shop. The last thing you do is send it out for paint or anodize or one of those sorts of things. The outside processes are a really good source of intel for us because if they don't get paid, they don't do any work. Those guys, they shut her down right away, but they'll call us and say, hey, so-and-so is not paying their bill. You probably ought to know about it. And so we'll actively get involved and go help. Geopolitical mitigation. Why is it on the chart? You guys moved out of Russia 2020, didn't you? Yeah. We had to go do a bunch of qualifications on forgings to finish those up. And so we had inventory, we had buffer stock, and we had to finish all the quals. So for all the forgers in the room that helped us, thank you very much. Good job. You're almost done. And then extended lead times. That was really a key feature of mostly of the, I'm going to offend everybody in the room by saying steel. That's in the market. For us, the Boeing people in buying stuff, we buy titanium and aluminum. And if it's not one of those two things and it's metal, therefore it must be steel. It's really nickel alloy and stainless steel and all those sort of specialty stuff that many good mills make. We lump into one big thing called steel. Lead times was turned into a disaster in that market, and it caught a lot of folks short, particularly like bearing suppliers and little fitting and latch suppliers. So I found myself and my team taking almost every day phone calls for the most of 2023, chasing those sorts of hours. Though my phone hasn't rung much this year, so things are getting better. The labor mostly got better. The first two bullets, our attrition went down. Almost every supplier I talked to was having more success getting, attracting and retaining talent, keeping attrition. And then we've moved to training. It's a big training load, taking on new people. And we had speaking of that, you know, a lot of conversations around new people are sort of like, I've got new people. It's sort of like a negative thing. We're trying to also change that. Like, hey, we got new people. It's awesome. We got people that are excited about aerospace, want to learn to make airplanes, want to be in the supply chain. Like, love your new people. Like, don't talk negatively about your new folks. They hear it, you know, it's a good thing. Bring new people on and then help them. Surround them with talent, surround them with experience, and understand that in many of your factories, your employees may have been very, very experienced at making the same thing for 20, 30 years. To a set of work instructions that made sense to somebody who worked on cars in their garage or farm equipment, or, you know, sort of had hands-on jobs as kids. Like, I worked with my dad on cars as a kid. Like, you know, mechanic stuff comes naturally to me. My kids look at an iPad. Like, they're not going to work on a car. Like, this does not come natural to them. So think about your work instructions. Think about, are your instructions clear enough for the new generation of workforce? If you look at some of those things now through your kids' eyes, your new employees' eyes, it won't make sense. So you got to sort of reinvent your training and double down on helping your new people out. And then supply performance was, of course, a challenge. I already talked about lead times and delays. Mostly for us, you know, our direct supply chain, thank you very much, serves us pretty well as a direct OEM, but they don't necessarily serve all of our sub-tiers the same way. So we had a lot of sub-tier raw material shortages that we had to jump in and help on. And that was a key feature of last year. What do we do this year? I probably should have reordered this. You know, I was as I got up early this morning, I was looking at this going, you know, our priorities have shifted certainly since we made this. Like, say, quality system is probably our number one focus right now. Not probably, it is our number one focus right now. In fact, when I get back on Monday, it's the entire supply chain team, 5,000 some odd people at Boeing. We won't be taking your phone calls. We'll be in a quality and safety stand down. So call Tuesday. But that's number one for us, especially and working with our supply chain partners. We had a supply chain conference, what, 2-3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? I don't know, I've lost track of time. And we had 250 of our suppliers. Some of you in the room were there, and we spent an entire day together and didn't talk about rates. We didn't talk about production. We talked about safety and quality. So for you guys, think about that in your own production system. And then going down the list, we're going to, you know, you see the watch item there, or our watch areas there. Quality is one to talk about. Relationships are another one. You know, I've had, you know, I love coming to this conference because I get to learn a lot of interesting data. But I really love the conference because I get to hang out with all of you. And so I only went to the general session yesterday. Unfortunately, I got to see the first hour, which was great. And then I spent the rest of the day in sessions with many of you guys working on relationships. I know we've got a lot of work to do here. Some of our prior behavior wasn't the best in terms of things like PFS and all those sorts of things. We're not doing that anymore. And so we are trying to get spend a little more time working better together. In our space, I think it sort of comes natural. A lot of people in this industry that have been doing this a long time. It doesn't come natural to other parts of the supply chain, and it may not come natural to your people. So I bring this up because not because of like us and you. I think a lot of us know each other really well. Think about your suppliers and your other customers, and think about relationships and helping each other when they're down, and you know, working together to you know, serve an industry. Sometimes the commercial stuff gets in the way. Sometimes, you know, attitudes and other things get in the way. But to the extent you can break through those things and know that you're in this for a long term, I think we'll all be better served. Multi-sourcing, expanding qualifications, we'll continue to work on that. Sub-tier engagement, I think I spend, myself and my team, we spend 40% of our week helping others. So our job, my day job is, my team's day job is, buying raw material and standards for the Boeing company, right? Fasteners and metal and carbon fiber and chemicals and all that sort of stuff. 40% of our time is actually spending time in that space helping our tier ones out and our sub tiers. I spend lots of times on phone calls with some of you in the room and Spirit, Honeywell, Collins, Mode, BAE, like you name it, we get a phone call about it. Joe's Machine Shop, like everybody reaches out for help. It's a little bit of a self-inflicted wound because I do this every time and I put my phone number up and I say, call me if you need help. Good news is that lots of people are calling. And so we do want to help. And so, but the message here for you guys though is if there's a tier one or tier two or tier three or somebody in the Boeing supply chain that is you're working with and the relationship is bad or you're fighting or they're not paying their bill and you're not shipping because they're not paying their bill, like whatever kind of nastiness goes on, I'll hear about it eventually and I'll have to call you and bother you. So to the extent you can, treat our sub tiers as if they were Boeing. Because if you don't, I got to come call you anyway. So just save us the time and assume that all of our sub tiers, they need the help just like we do. And with that, again, call, write, text. That's my personal cell phone number. I put it up every conference. It's okay. You can use it. Lots of people do. And questions. I'm probably over on time. Sorry. Do I have time for questions? We do? Frank says yes.
Yeah.
Sam says yes. Okay.
Yeah, it would be great.
Okay.
Okay, over there.
Thank you for your presentation. Why are Boeing going with sustainable aviation fuel and not with hydrogen? And can you get completely net zero with sustainable aviation fuel?
Well, it's a really good question. The current infrastructure is not ready for the aircraft architecture. The wings are not a pressure vessel. And if you may not know that, the wings are full of fuel. They can't take pressure. The whole system isn't set up for this. So SAF is our number one fastest way to net zero by 2050. It's hands down that simple. We do work in hydrogen. We have the first two aircraft that flew hydrogen more than 20 years ago, though. But from a large scale commercial standpoint, will we get there eventually? And I hope we do. I actually want a hydrogen car. I think hydrogen cars are going to be way cooler than EVs, but we work on it for sure work on it as an R&D space. But right now we are not ready to put a 777 size hydrogen airplane up. So SAF is the way to go, and us and the airlines are investing in it, and we're spending a lot of time testing all of the components that go into the fuel system to make sure they work with the fuel. Good question.
Any other questions? Right, satisfied.
I wore them all out. Or I answered the rate question early and killed them all.
One last question,
Yeah.
please, in the front.
Yeah.
Second, mic was arrived.
Right, there you are, yeah.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So it's probably a question that probably quite a lot of people want to know. How is the 737 rate and the holding the 787 at rate 10 affecting demand for titanium and sort of generation of scrap throughout your supply chain?
The 37 isn't a big driver of titanium use or scrap for us. The 87 for sure is. I think somebody, I don't know if it was Bob or Sam or somebody yesterday, no, it was Nick. They talked about the volume of scrap generated on the 787, he's not too far off. Yeah, so it is for sure having an impact. The thing that's harder for me to see, quite frankly, is because we do the scrap collection as well in our supply chain. I gotta take it back to the mills. The thing that's harder for us to see is how much finished goods inventory of parts was still in the system from COVID, and I don't think it's all worked out yet. And so we're at 5 now. Certainly getting to 10 will make more chips and get more scrap. We've got a little bit of time to get there, though.
Okay, great. So many thanks for your
Yeah.
presentation. It was
Thank you.
very impressive.
Yeah.
And I think we have big applause for that. And this is having a year with us. All right, thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have now a very short break, 9 minutes, please. So you can rebreathe a little bit. And then we heard about that sustainability is a big issue. We have a next on stage, a session about sustainability in our industry. So very warm welcome. Come back to us in now 8 minutes. Thank you.